You probably won't believe me, but I have to tell someone what happened at the Sundown Motor Inn before I completely forget what it felt like to be young. The memory is fading, like an old photograph left in the sun, and the face I see in the mirror every morning is becoming more familiar than the one I left behind in that dusty, forgotten corner of the desert. Be honest, are you watching this lying in bed right now? Or somewhere else? Comment your setup. I was hitching my way west, a Kerouac fantasy, fueled by cheap coffee and the naive belief that I had all the time in the world. My ride, a grizzled trucker named Marcus with a map of the interstate etched in the lines around his eyes, dropped me at a fork in the road as the sun began to bleed across the horizon. "Don't stay at the Sundown," he'd grumbled, pointing a thick finger at a flickering neon sign about a mile down the desolate highway. "Place has stories." When I pressed him, he just shook his head. Stories about people checking in and checking out different, older. Of course, that was all the invitation I needed. I was 22, immortal and stupid. I slung my backpack over my shoulder and walked toward the buzzing, sickly pink light. The motel looked like it had been there since the dawn of time. The paint was peeling in long leprotic strips, and the air was thick with the smell of hot asphalt and something else. Something cloyingly sweet, like rotting peaches. In the office, a man stood behind the counter, perfectly still. He introduced himself as Silas. He had the kind of ageless face you see in old portraits. Smooth, pale skin, dark eyes that seemed to hold no reflection. "Just need a room for the night," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silent office. Silas slid a tarnished brass key across the counter. The tag read, 12A. "Room 12 is all we have available," he said, his voice a dry, papery rustle. He didn't blink, not once. I should have walked away then. I should have slept in a ditch by the side of the road. But the bravado of youth is a powerful anesthetic. "Heard this place has stories," I said, trying to sound casual. A faint, thin smile touched Silas's lips. "The desert is full of stories, son. Most of them are just mirages." Room 12 was aggressively, depressingly normal. A queen bed with a faded floral comforter, a wood-paneled TV from the last century, and a painting of a generic seascape hanging crookedly on the wall. The only odd thing was the mirror above the dresser. It was clouded at the edges, the silver backing flaking away like ash, making my reflection look distant and distorted. I dropped my pack, the words of the trucker, Marcus, echoing in my head. Checking out different, older. It was a dare, a local legend to spook tourists. But my curiosity was a gnawing thing. I pulled out my phone and my portable charger. I'd set up a time-lapse, I decided. I'd record myself sleeping and prove it was all just a ghost story. I angled the phone on the nightstand, propped up by Gideon's Bible, making sure the frame covered the whole bed. I pressed record, a smug grin on my face. A part of me almost hoped something weird would happen. It would make one hell of a story to tell my friends, Leah and Dev, back home. I felt safe, in control, a scientist conducting a harmless experiment. Sleep didn't come easily. The air conditioner rattled with a deathly rhythm, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Silas's blank, unblinking stare. The sweet, rotting smell from outside seemed to be seeping through the walls, filling my lungs. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I slipped into a heavy, dreamless sleep. I woke with a gasp, not to a sound, but to a feeling. A deep, profound ache had settled into my bones, the kind of weary pain I'd always associated with my grandfather. My joints felt like rusted hinges. My throat was sandpaper dry, and when I tried to swallow, it felt like I was swallowing dust. The morning light was a pale, anemic gray filtering through the grimy window. It felt late. Not late in the day, but late in life. I stumbled out of bed, every muscle protesting, and made my way to the bathroom. My reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror made me stop dead. I leaned closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. The face staring back at me was mine, but it wasn't. The skin around my eyes was cross-hatched with fine lines I'd never seen before. My hair, usually a dark brown, was flecked with silver at the temples, thin and brittle to the touch. I looked tired. Not just didn't sleep well, tired. I looked like I'd been worn down by 30 years of quiet disappointments. I looked like my father. While you're listening. If this happened to you, would you tell anyone or keep it a secret forever? Be honest. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I scrambled back into the room, my trembling hands grabbing for my phone. The screen was still on, the time-lapse dutifully recording. I stabbed the screen to stop it, my breath coming in ragged bursts. I had to see. I had to know. I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed and played the video. For the first few hours, it was just me, tossing and turning in fast motion. The sped-up footage looked almost comical. Then, around 2 a.m., something changed. A faint shimmer appeared in the air above my sleeping body, like heat rising from pavement. It was almost imperceptible at first, a slight distortion in the video quality, but it grew. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the haze coalesced, hovering over me like a shroud. It wasn't a ghost, not in any traditional sense. It was more like a pocket of warped reality, a living mirage. As the digital clock in the corner of the footage raced forward, my body on the bed began to change. I could see the lines on my face deepening in real time. I could see the life, the vitality being drawn out of me, siphoned into that shimmering, indistinct shape. It was feeding on me. It was feeding on my time. I zoomed in, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely control the screen. For a split second, as the haze undulated, I saw something within it, a form, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles, pressed down against my chest. It had no face, no eyes, just a silent, parasitic presence that was drinking my youth like water. The video ended as the first light of dawn touched the window, and the shimmering thing dissolved into nothing, leaving behind a man who had gone to sleep 22 and woken up 50. I didn't pack. I just grabbed my phone and my wallet and ran. I burst out of the room into the blinding desert sun, my heart threatening to explode. Silas was on the porch, calmly sweeping away dust that probably hadn't moved in a decade. He looked up at me, and his dark, placid eyes held not a shred of surprise. Only a calm, quiet satisfaction. My gaze flickered past him into the office. Hanging on the wall was a framed, black-and-white photograph. It showed a younger-looking Silas cutting a ceremonial ribbon in front of the newly opened Sundown Motor Inn. The caption at the bottom read, "Grand Opening, 1962. My blood ran cold. The man in the photograph, taken over 60 years ago, was the exact same man standing before me. He hadn't aged a single day. He gave me that same thin, patient smile. It wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was the simple, detached look of a farmer gazing at his livestock. I ran. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned and the motel was a tiny speck in the rearview mirror of my memory. Hours later, a kind family in a minivan picked me up. The mother kept giving me worried looks, asking if I was all right, if I needed a doctor. That was 6 months ago. The gray in my hair is permanent. The lines around my eyes are deepening. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with a phantom ache in my joints, and I have to fight the urge to check my phone to see if that shimmering haze is hovering over me again. The doctors can't find anything wrong, of course. How do you explain to a man of science that something stole 30 years of your life while you slept? You can't. So you learn to live as a ghost in your own skin, a young man trapped in a rapidly aging body. And some nights, when the room is dark and utterly silent, I can still feel that faint, shimmering weight pressing down on my chest, hungry for the little time I have left. Thank you for being here. It keeps me going. If you want more horror every week, subscribe and join our little haunted family.